All right, let's dive right in and talk about sharks. Specifically, remember that documentary, Cocaine Sharks? The one that looked at whether sharks were actually eating those cocaine bales that sometimes get lost at sea. Well, turns out there's an interesting development in that whole story. A new study just came out. It was done in Brazil, and the researchers found sharks that tested positive for cocaine. Yeah, you heard that right. Cocaine. And this wasn't in, like, the middle of the ocean. These sharks were swimming off the coast of Rio de Janeiro. So, as wild as this whole cocaine sharks thing sounds, and I mean, it does sound like something straight out of a movie, right? It actually brings up some pretty big questions about, the state of our oceans. The thing is, this new study, it's kind of a big deal because it's really the first solid evidence we have that sharks are being exposed to cocaine. And get this, it's not just like a small handful of sharks here and there. This study looked at a specific kind of shark, Brazilian shark-nosed sharks, and there are smaller species that spend their entire lives in coastal waters. So basically, whatever's in the water, they're swimming in it. And unfortunately, in this case, that includes pollution, which isn't exactly great news for them. The researchers actually got 13 of these sharks, some younger ones, some smaller adults, from local fishermen, and they tested their muscle and liver tissue. And what they found was kind of alarming, to be honest. Every single one of those sharks tested positive for cocaine. So to break down exactly what these findings mean and what the implications are for the sharks themselves and for the environment, I've got our expert here with us.
So it's really interesting, right? It's not just that we found cocaine in these sharks, it's the levels we found that are pretty remarkable. The study actually found levels of cocaine up to 100 times higher than what's been reported before in any other marine animals.
100 times. Seriously.
Yeah, 100 times, which is, that's not just a little trace amount. That means these sharks are getting a pretty significant dose of cocaine somehow.
So how's all this cocaine ending up in the sharks? I mean, I got to ask, are they like going after those lost bales of cocaine? Or is there something else going on here?
Well, it's probably a mix of things, but honestly, those lost bales are probably not the main culprit here. I mean, think about it. There are a lot of other ways that cocaine gets into the ocean. For example, a lot of illegal drug labs are set up near coastlines, makes it easier to transport, and they often dump their waste directly into the water. And then there's the sewage systems. Yeah, a lot of sewage systems aren't equipped to filter out drugs, so cocaine that people use can end up in the ocean that way too. And then, yeah, I'm sure those lost bales play a role, but it's probably much smaller than people think.
So basically, it's less about these sharks, like, actively seeking out a fix, and more about them just trying to survive in waters that are, well, kind of a mess because of us.
Exactly. And these sharks, they're basically like canaries in a coal mine. They're giving us a serious warning sign about just how much pollution is ending up in our oceans.
Okay, so we've got these sharks swimming around with surprisingly high levels of cocaine in their systems. But this isn't just about sharks, is it? This feels like it has much bigger implications.
It does, and frankly, we're just beginning to understand what those implications might be. We already know that cocaine is toxic to a variety of marine life, mollusks, crustaceans, even other types of fish. While we don't yet know the specific effects on sharks, it's definitely a red flag.
And you mentioned earlier that all of the female sharks in this study were pregnant. That adds another layer of concern, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It raises questions about whether this exposure to cocaine could be harming their offspring and what that might mean for the future of these shark populations, which are already facing threats.
That's a really good point. So we've got potential harm to the sharks themselves, but what are the bigger picture? What about the health of the entire ecosystem?
Well, sharks, as ADAX predators, sit at the very top of the food chain. They're like indicators for the overall health of the ocean. So, if these sharks are contaminated, it suggests a much wider problem, a deeply concerning level of pollution that could be impacting the entire web of life in those waters.
That makes sense. What goes around comes around, as they say. But how does this all connect back to us? We're not exactly down there swimming with these cocaine-exposed sharks.
You're right, we're not swimming with them. But here's the thing, shark meat is a relatively common food source in Brazil. And that brings up another concern, the potential for human exposure to cocaine through the consumption of contaminated seafood.
Wow, I didn't even consider that angle. So we're talking about potential impacts on entire ecosystems and even human health.
Exactly. This is much bigger than just a catchy headline. And it highlights the urgent need for further research to pinpoint the main sources of this contamination and to understand the long-term effects of cocaine exposure on shark behavior, reproduction, and overall health. This isn't just a scientific curiosity, it's a wake-up call.
It really is. This whole cocaine sharks idea, it started as a bit of a media sensation, but as we've dug deeper with you today, it's clear that this is a serious issue with far-reaching consequences. It makes you think about the unintended consequences of our actions and how even seemingly small things, like what we flush down the toilet, can have ripple effects on the ocean and its inhabitants in ways we might never imagine. If even sharks, these powerful apex predators, are vulnerable to something like drug pollution, what does it say about the state of our planet? That's something to think about as we wrap up today's deep dive.